Hi, everybody. Let's talk about Mercury forming a conjunction to the Sun, which is also known as the Cazimi. And it is when Mercury transitions, um, either out of a morning star or out of an evening star cycle. In this case, Mercury is transitioning from an evening star to a morning star. So you can see there's Mercury retrograde, 9 degrees of Leo, and there's the Sun at 9 degrees of Leo. Today we will be looking at both the Babylonian and tropical zodiac for different reasons. Sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to, I suppose, step into both zodiacs, if you like, and understand how to synchronize, both perspectives. It takes a little while for our mind to be trained in such a way, but hopefully, the things that I share, you will be able to draw your own conclusions based on your own birth chart and what's happening in your life at the moment. So Mercury went retrograde around the 18th of July, and this conjunction occurs on the 1st of August, which will be the 31st of July for those of you in the Northern Hemisphere. And it's literally just hours away, hours away. And I was very inspired by this energy yesterday, very inspired with this Leo energy, by the way. I know there's catastrophic events going on everywhere. Um, and it's not that I don't care about that. Of course I do. But I also know that there's always catastrophic events going on. And um, where we can help and where we can support and where we can give guidance and the like, then that's very, very important. But it's also very, very important that we stay aligned with our own path. So this Mercury Sun conjunction, we're basically at the middle section of this retrograde cycle, right? Which began on the 18th of July. The retrograde cycle ends around the 11th of August. So we're right at the middle. And Mercury at the moment is actually invisible as well. And it forms a conjunction here at this point at 9 degrees of Leo. And that's literally just hours away. So first thing is, well, where is Leo in your birth chart? Of course, this could be your own natal Mercury. You could have Mercury in Leo, for instance, or other planets in Leo. So this will be obviously quite impactful when it's aligning with certain points or planets or positions in your chart. So, for example, for me, all this Leo energy every year pretty much, activates my seventh house because I've got Leo on the descendant. And I don't have a lot in the seventh house. I have a couple of things there, but either way, the seventh house is such an important part of the chart for any person because it corresponds to all our relationships. And certainly every time, Leo season comes up, there's always quite a lot of energy, drama, playfulness. It's quite wonderful in a lot of ways, actually. But the backstory as well with a lot of this is the Venus-Mars cycle, which has been incredibly potent and intense, as I have discussed over the last 3 transmissions that I uploaded on my channel. And even this Cazimi itself, believe it or not, actually corresponds to relationship themes again. and I will explain why in a moment. But first, let me just say this. When a planet forms a conjunction to the sun, it is a marriage between the two planets. It is a fusion of energies that unite and are alchemically transformed, in some kind of way. Now, this happens in Leo in the tropical zodiac. So it brings to focus our heart, doesn't it? I think this cycle is quite dramatic because it's Leo, and it really does bring us to that core issue of what's inside our heart about anything that's going on in our life. I mean, whether it's a relationship or not, our heart is always involved in some kind of way, isn't it? Unless we are heartless, so to speak. But most of us are not. So our heart is invested in so many different things in our life. And Mercury, of course, is the messenger. Hermes, the one of the gods that was able to move through all worlds. That's why he was called messenger of the gods. So what's the messenger pointing to here for each of us? Well, obviously the personal element to this is going to be very unique for all of us because it depends on you, you, the soul, you, the person, your life story, and where you are at the moment. But regardless of those personalized details, which need to be assessed individually, at a overall level, this has got very much to do with what's in our heart at the moment, what has been going on in our life relative to everything we've been thinking about, people we've been communicating with, connections we've been making. It could be anything from, travel to trade, typical, Mercury things, learning, studying, or just in general, your connections and communications with people. So given that Mercury is going to be reborn as a morning star, the morning star Mercury is associated with the god Apollo. And Apollo is the truth and the light. And Apollo represents wisdom and certainly creativity. But one very simple point to remember about Mercury being reborn as a morning star, which is defined by Apollo, it is literally the birth, the absolute birth of new ideas. So whatever we have been processing and reflecting on and thinking about and working through, well, this particular conjunction is a really prime portal, if you like, or prime time to really clear out, I suppose, things in your heart and focus on what you really want to give birth to from your heart space that can be transmitted into your mind and your thoughts. Because not long after this, as the sun moves away from Mercury, which it will, Mercury will continue to go retrograde, and the sun will progress forward in Leo. Mercury will remain invisible for some time in most latitudes. This point really is defined by our location on Earth. So I'm just going to speak generally. Generally speaking, Mercury's first appearance will be on the 16th of August. And that's a very important date because that too corresponds to something really interesting happening close to that date, which I'll get to in a moment. But just remember with a Cazimi conjunction, which is Cazimi is an Arabic term that means in the heart of the sun. This is just a really powerful opportunity for us to absolutely give birth to really deep meaningful, important, heart-centered matters in our life. And that might be releasing certain things as well. And of course, reorienting and centering our energy for the new cycle to begin. As I've mentioned before, when a planet is invisible in ancient astrology, Babylonian astrology, it is understood that the planet is in the underworld. And whilst that planet or that divinity is in the underworld, it's literally having a conversation with God, with the source. So, you know, Mercury actually corresponds to conversation, chatting, discussions, ideas, and so forth. And here we have Mercury in the underworld actually having a conversation with the source and preparing itself for its rebirth, which will be this Cazimi point. And subsequently, as the Sun and Mercury separate and Mercury makes its first appearance, when a planet makes its first appearance, that's when the themes, the matters corresponding to the divinity start to show up. That's when things come to life, as it were, because they are seen in the sky from our perspective on Earth. So the Sun, Mercury, Cazimis are not an uncommon thing. They happen relatively frequently, but at this point in time, given all these other things that are going on as well, this is quite a powerful point. There are many who do believe in the Lionsgate portal, which we are, at the moment, the actual date, of course, is the 8th of the 8th, but that energy apparently is open before the 8th. Now, I know there are a lot of people that debunk that or think that the information is incorrect or believe or what. It doesn't really matter. Okay. What matters is when we are here, whatever we are learning, whatever we are discovering, whatever we are understanding, understanding, whatever we are seeking is what we'll find, is what we will see, is what we will hear. And it's a resonance thing, it's resonance and it's magnetism as well. Of course, magnetism comes from the planet Venus. So whether you believe this or I believe that, or Paul believes XYZ, it really doesn't matter. I'm laughing because Mercury is the one that tends to create this division, if you like, in humanity, in our minds, in consensus reality, because Mercury, Gemini particularly, actually is a sign that tends to split things up into, right, wrong, good, bad, black, white, dark, evil, and so forth. And that just creates a division, or it creates a one-sided stance or position. But the fact is that everything exists all in the one space and time for infinity. It is just that we may have a perception or an intuition or an attraction or a repulsion to numerous different things, which creates this difference between us. But it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. What matters is what feels in alignment for you. So if the Lionsgate portal is something that you focus on, that you work with, well, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Now, the other very, very interesting things, by the way, when Mercury appears on the 16th of August or thereabouts, depending on your latitude, that will be at 5 degrees of Leo in the tropical zodiac, and that will be at 10 degrees of Cancer in the Babylonian zodiac. Now, This Sun Mercury conjunction, I said a moment ago that it does connect to relationships, because this conjunction is literally on the midpoint of the South Node in Virgo and Venus at this time. So the midpoint of Venus South Node, where Mars is still very close here as well. It's not quite there to be exact in the midpoint structure, but Mars is still there in the same sign as the South Node. So you can see it, immediately. This is a pointing towards matters of relationship themes. Of course, it's Venus and Mars. And of course, our own inner desires, Mars, our will to action things, Mars, and Venus, our love, our value, our worth, our relationships, anything and everything we love is Venus. It doesn't matter what it is, a human, an object, an idea, it doesn't matter. Venus rules anything that we love, period. So having the Cazimi at the midpoint of Venus South Node, it's pretty obvious to me that there's going to be a very strong reconsideration and rethinking about recent matters in relationships. Now, that could be with a couple of different people. It could be with one person in particular. It just depends on your situation. But given that Mercury is being reborn here as Apollo, the morning star, he's going to burst through when he appears. He, she, they appear in the sky as a morning star on the 16th of August with a totally new mindset, if you like, a totally new perspective, totally new ideas of how we have been viewing or communicating or thinking about a very specific relationship or relationships. It's inevitable that that is going to be a key theme here because the Cazimi occurs between Venus and the South Node. And so the South Node, of course, has meant, with Mars there and with Venus squaring it recently, has meant that there's been some patterns that we've had to analyze in ourselves, Virgo. Really face some pretty deep and complex relationship themes that either we've had our entire life or that we've developed recently, or it just depends again on your circumstances. But it's clear that there is something from the past that we've had to really examine, Virgo, in our scope of relationships. And with Mercury Sun conjunction at the midpoint of Venus South Node, there is a rebirth that's going to come in our whole perception and mindset moving forward. It's not as simple as that for everybody because it does depend on your circumstances, because the Venus-Mars cycle, it began in February of 2024 with a conjunction to Pluto. And as I've mentioned a few times already in previous transmissions, the relationships that have been born from February 2024, from that point, anytime to now, have this Plutonian fated element to them. And that is not an easy thing to experience, but it is part of our soul's destiny, because Pluto rules the soul and it does rule fate and destiny as well. And Pluto, may I remind all of us, is the archetypal planet that also brings up people, souls, that we re-meet again from the past. Thus the word fated a fated encounter, especially in relationships, in a lot of cases, if not most, usually feels like there's something about this relationship, this connection, this person that feels it's so intense and it's so powerful, for better or for worse, right? But it feels very important to my soul, to my soul's growth, regardless of how it looks to everybody else on the outside, right? So these themes are still very, very present here. As we move forward, though, and also this Cazimi is trine Saturn Neptune, um, and Chiron just stationed retrograde a day before this. So there's a lot of fire energy being, amplified here, focused upon. And fire, of course, is the element that helps us transmute. It helps us step into the fire and purify ourselves. Literally purify our heart. And, it's I think, heart purification is a complex subject and a very important one as well, because no matter how many times we purify our heart and, set new intentions and new desires may be born, we will again have some type of experience where our heart may be broken or our heart may be hurt. There's we just, it's not like we just purify and that's it. We are suddenly, immune to our heart being hurt or broken or loved, whatever it's going to be. It's part and parcel of this physical experience on this earth plane. So every time, the Sun, Mercury in Leo, especially, it is a heart purification portal. And in this case, it's very unique because it is trine the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, which we know is building up to the 0-degree Aries in February 2026. So we're just at the sort of, it's like there's a vast horizon in front of us, right? And we can just see a tiny little speckle of it at the moment. That's the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. We're probably more inclined to be sensing things and feeling things, whether they're good or bad or indifferent is not the point, but we will be sensing a lot of different things with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And anxiety is one of the most common ones, actually, when it comes to Saturn and Neptune. But we're still at very early stages. It's a prelude, right? So the trine from Saturn Neptune to the Mercury Leo Cazimi, I think is very important as well, because it is also perhaps suggesting, hey, these new ideas that you are thinking about, this, rethinking, because Mercury is retrograde. When Mercury is retrograde, our mental perceptions and mental processes and thoughts are internalized, right? So we are thinking about a lot of different things inside ourselves and inside our heart, because it's all happening in Leo. And so the rethinking of things, which I think is very much connected to relationship themes, again brings in the Saturn-Neptune element, which says idealism versus reality. So it's fine to have dreams and to have fantasies and to escape in, la la land and fantasy land and whatever. There's no harm in that. In fact, it's a very powerful experience, because a lot of artists create their art from those very precise spaces and places in their imagination. So it has a place. But when you have Saturn right next to Neptune, it's saying, okay, here's the ideal of what you are either projecting or perceiving or desiring. And right next to it, here's the reality. And you need to fuse the two together and find the the happy medium, if you like, the middle ground, right? It is about being able to still be connected to beautiful dreams, but it is also about being very clear and realistic about the realness of the situation in question, whatever it may be for you. And so here they are forming a trine to this Cazimi, suggesting that there's some sort of support because trine aspects mean that planets are in the same element, in this case, fire. And fire is spirit energy, and fire inspires. The word inspiration means to be in spirit. So there's a lot of inspiration that can be born, out of this Cazimi conjunction, but we've just got to be really, really honest and clear, about our steps moving forward, because of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, particularly. Um, and just also, I'll throw this in because it could very well um, be important. It just really enhances and emphasizes the Sun Mercury Cazimi actually being connected to relationship matters. Now, think broadly as well, because this could be, relationship matters on the world stage, with leaders and things like that as well. Okay, because when you have one country's leader or government officials or policy leaders or whatever it is, when they are communicating with other groups or individuals, be it in their own country or abroad or whatever, that is a relationship. It's ruled by Venus. Their style and their approach might not be very Venusian, but it is a Venus matter. Because anytime we are relating with somebody, we are doing our Venus thing. So, Venus, let's go to her now, because what's going to happen is she's going to, in tropical astrology, and I'll bring in some of the, oh, sorry, I completely, thanks for reminding me. Apollo, he's kicking in again. I was just going to say that this Sun-Mercury conjunction is opposite, well, it is opposite Pluto as well, by the way. So, well, the new moon was in Leo, right? Opposite Pluto. We all know that. So we've started a very intense lunation cycle with the new moon in Leo opposite Pluto, which of course I've spoken about, but the Sun Mercury is also opposite Pluto too. So, this too is indicative of obviously rebirth and transformation, and perhaps purging some uh, obsessive thoughts and ideas that we've had. That sometimes obsessive thoughts and ideas can lead to certain creative expressions and productivity, but at other times it can also lead to um, mental disturbance. Mercury, mental disturbance. So either way, Pluto always digs very deep and has X-ray vision. So Pluto in this story is diving very, very deep into the process of what our mind has been intensely focused on and what it is now ready to actually die to. There's a death here. There's some kind of mental death that needs to take place. And that could just be, something you've been thinking about nonstop, or it could be someone you've been thinking about nonstop, etc. And also opposite the Sun Mercury conjunction, the opposite midpoint happens to be sitting in between Chiron and Juno. Chiron and Juno. Those of you that don't know what Chiron and Juno mean, I'm not going to do a tutorial on that. Most of you do know what Juno and Chiron represent, but just very quickly, Juno represents relationships and all contractual agreements. All. Doesn't matter whether it's a personal or professional one. All contractual agreements are ruled by Juno. And Chiron just went retrograde, a few hours before this. And here's the Sun Mercury at the midpoint of Chiron and Juno and South Node in Venus. So, there's clearly something that's been, has been, or is quite painful in this story of the Lionheart and the Lionheart's journey with this new moon, which started off with an opposition to Pluto. But it is about being really true to our heart and having the fucking courage actually to honor that, even if the person that you want or desire for or have expectations of and so on and so forth isn't able to do that, doesn't want to do that, refuses to do that, whatever the case may be. We have to do that for ourselves. We have to honor our own heart, even if another does not. That's what this Cazimi really speaks to at the heart level. And, it is Mercury being reborn as Apollo. So it will improve, but look at the Cazimi is also square a moon in Scorpio. So this Cazimi is a real heart purger, heart mind purger. And the content that's coming up is quite deep and could be very, very difficult depending on your circumstances. But I guess with an opposition to Pluto and the moon in Scorpio, the obvious invitation is you've really got to process the depth of the feelings that you've had about whatever's been going on and purge and just allow those feelings to rise and move through without remaining obsessed, as it were. I'll jump ahead to Venus, Jupiter, but I think, let me think. There's a triple alignment that's coming up with Jupiter, Venus, and the star Sirius, also known as the dog star, also known as the brightest star, very rich in, numerous lineages of mythology, also known to be our spiritual sun, sitting behind the sun that we see from our position here on Earth. Very powerful star. Just about everyone has heard about the dog star, the star Sirius. Even if they know nothing about it, everyone's heard of it. Now, its helical appearance, which happens every year, is a really big deal and does correspond to a lot of different matters historically that have been, momentous or, momentous moments in history and, quite significant. So every year, there's a lot of focus on this. But I guess what makes it very unique this year is that Jupiter and Venus both align with Sirius at 14 degrees. And, that within itself is is pretty spectacular because the nature of the star Sirius is said to be of Jupiter and Venus. The nature, like every star has a very specific nature or characteristics, mythologies, stories. And then each star will have ascribed to it specific planets that describe the energy of that star. And for Sirius, it is said that it is pretty much all Jupiter, Venus. So, that obviously shows us that the benefic energy of the star Sirius coming together with the two planets that correspond to its energy is a pretty spectacular thing. Now, remember that Jupiter was in Cancer 12 years ago. Okay. So, the last time this would have happened would have been 12 years ago. Now, 12 years is not 1,000 years, but still, it's a fair chunk, you know, sort of out of our life. In fact, I just want to see if they were together again, Venus and Jupiter, that is. Yeah, see that? 12 years ago, the three of them did not align. Yeah, so this makes it very, 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 very special. Okay, let me just get so somewhere around here, there's the last time Jupiter was in Cancer. It was 2013. But look at where Venus was. She was in Libra, squaring Jupiter, which is fine. Jupiter square Venus is not, it's not a big drama. It can be gluttony and overindulgence, of course, but it's not death and those are more intense things about life. Anyway, the point being that Venus was not with Jupiter the last time Jupiter aligned with Sirius in Cancer. So that tells us that this particular alignment this year, there it is there, Jupiter-Venus, is really, 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 really special. You know what? I might after this video, I won't do it now because it'll just chew up more time. I might just have a look and see, well, when was the last time the three of them aligned? Because it may very well be that 12 years before that, they were not aligned as well. I'd have to have a look. I don't know. But we do know that 12 years ago, they were not. So the fact that they are now is a very, very beautiful omen. Jupiter, Venus, Sirius. So it just enhances all the wonderful qualities about Jupiter and Venus. And we know Jupiter and Venus are the two benefics. They are the ones that usually bring, gifts, abundance, blessings, enjoyment, pleasures, basically all the things that we really love and enjoy that help us grow, that open our heart, that bring happiness and joy. Venus is happiness and Jupiter is joy, literally. So here they are, in alignment with the star Sirius, which is our spiritual sun. And so, again, depending on your personal story and where the alignment occurs in your birth chart and what's happening in your life and so forth, obviously those personal details will, define how this energy shows up for you. But I think it's important to be aware of it either way. Sirius is universal charm. It favors, it favors, nobility, just high status, high energy. And I'm talking about, I mean, I guess at the global scale, that would be defined as what's been structured by systems as being noble or royal or high status. There's these categories that people are born into, right? Due to past life stories and so forth. And your average man is considered an average man, and it doesn't have that status of royalty and so forth. And they're all just systems and categories that create, definitions which create these differences in this world that we live in. Otherwise, if these things didn't exist, then everybody would be the same and everybody would be equal. And personally, I'd prefer an Earth like that. And although on the surface at least anyway, it certainly doesn't appear as though anything is equal and even, right? Obviously. So what I'm getting at is that although the star series does tend to highlight these hierarchy type of nobles and so forth, it can also point to just that the nobility in your own heart, which is it's I can't even say just as important because that's ridiculous. Because I don't see things from that perspective in terms of status and royalty and so forth. I don't look at somebody who is known to be a king and think to myself, wow, that person's a king. I wish I could be a king or a queen. Because that's just it's just part of the coats and clothes and labels that we take on in our soul's journey at different points. But the essence, the deep core, infinite, immutable consciousness, to use Jeffrey Wolf Green's term, which is the soul, is indestructible. It doesn't equate to any one thing. It's more than all of that because it's everything at any moment. So getting back to the Jupiter-Venus-Sirius conjunction, there's lots of big indications of generosity, very peak benefic influence, love, wisdom, prosperity, leadership. There can be a lot of beautiful gifts and blessings that can be born out of this particular energy. Now, it is squaring, Saturn, Neptune. We can't deny that or ignore it. Is the square powerful enough to overthrow the goodness and the abundance of Jupiter, Venus, Sirius? Well, I guess that would depend on the individual, and people's intentions. What's in the person's heart, you know? Uh, if you've got things in your heart that are not noble, not authentic, coming from a place that is evil, or um, intentionally wanting to cause harm to another. I think those states, that's when things can go. Um, Things can be problematic, right? So, as I've said, with Neptune and Saturn, it's the ideal versus the reality. And those two can be so confusing together and so blended in a way where the Neptune is more overpowering. So we're not really able to see the reality of situations. Saturn, I bring this up because Saturn can actually be quite cruel. Saturn, Mars in particular, that energy together is cruelty. Saturn, Neptune is not cruelty, but Saturn itself can be quite cruel. So, and Saturn's retrograde in Aries in its place of fall. So Saturn's not particularly happy in terms of what he would like to do, in the world. He's got to work internally. He's retrograde. He's got to work with Neptune. And he's squaring, Jupiter, Venus, and Sirius. So I guess what I'm saying is that you We can never look at things in isolation because nothing operates in isolation. I don't want to take away from the beauty, this absolute beautiful, spectacular, bountiful energy, Jupiter, Venus, Sirius. But I think we have to be realistic, Saturn, about the fact that Saturn Neptune is also squaring this energy. So I guess, in short, if we are to take away the best of Jupiter, Venus, and Sirius, which can be, wisdom, abundance, tremendous creative energy, expansion, happiness, joy, all the wonderful things, enjoyment, pleasures, all of that. People like to use the word downloading from the source or some other universe or some other or some star or cluster of stars or whatever. People download numerous inspirations, ideas, and the like from infinite spaces or portals. So Venus, Jupiter, Sirius definitely opens us up to all those possibilities. But I guess we just need to be open to the transcendent, Neptune. We need to be open and receptive to that and realize that on the one hand, there are no limits and no boundaries, which is Neptune. But on the other hand, in a physical experience, Saturn, there are limitations and there are boundaries that need to be put in play. And I guess it's just the fusion of the two that we need to really integrate and work with. But either way, the Jupiter-Venus-Sirius triple conjunction is pretty spectacular, and it didn't happen 12 years ago. So also, Venus is a morning star here still. Venus as a morning star is represented by Pallas Athena, the goddess of wisdom. And here she is conjunct the god of wisdom, Jupiter. So, there's huge, huge implications here for enormous ability to integrate more wisdom, which I think that word is overused so much and taken for granted. And it depends what age you are, but wisdom is to me, it's ineffable because it encapsulates so many different things. But it is the one thing that we can say that applies to all of us, really, when we have wisdom. See, it's ineffable. That's why I can't even articulate what I want to say about it. Well, wisdom is a great teacher, you could say. When you have wisdom about something, and it can be about something very simple, or it can be about something really extraordinary. But wisdom is what, it's what inspires people, poets, artists, philosophers, speakers. It inspires us in ways where there are no limits. So wisdom is a very beautiful, beautiful thing to have integrated and to continuously integrate and work on. And that's what Jupiter and Venus as a morning star bring to us through the portal of Sirius, which is also a portal that corresponds to spiritual wisdom. So there's tremendous potential for our own spiritual growth and our own level of wisdom. And I guess it is about bringing wisdom into the matters of relationships as well, because Venus is relationships. So this alignment, this is where I wanted just to bring in a little bit of Babylonian astrology. So that's today's date. You can see Mercury is invisible. So this is a Babylonian chart. This is Rumen Kolev's program. And I just want to show you the alignment of Venus and Jupiter with Sirius. Okay, so there's Jupiter and Venus. Perhaps I'll grab where are we? Okay, there's Venus, there's Jupiter, there's Sirius. Now, you see Mercury is still invisible here. Remember I said that Mercury's appearance is on the 16th of August? Well, you can see here this chart is for the 12th of August. That's why Mercury is still invisible. Mercury will appear on the 16th as Apollo, the morning star. Now, the conjunction of Jupiter and Venus and Sirius happens in Gemini in the Babylonian zodiac, which to me is very, very interesting because Mercury, being reborn as a morning star, Mercury is the dispositor to Jupiter and Venus in Gemini in the Babylonian chart. So even though we've just, today we've really looked at tropical astrology, just keep in mind that the conjunction occurs in Gemini and Mercury is the ruler. That's what I mean by dispositor. Mercury is the ruler to Gemini. So Mercury is very, very strongly linked to this Jupiter-Venus conjunction. So just keep that in mind because that says something very important about receiving information, knowledge, wisdom, in in more of a beautiful way than anything else because it is Jupiter Venus, Jupiter Venus. So there's just so much beauty and love that can come out of this, which will be very helpful, especially for the difficult things that have been going on with Venus and Mars. That have been squaring each other and, Mars on the south node and Venus squaring the nodes. And as I mentioned several times, they started their journey with a conjunction to Pluto last year. So, this Venus cycle has been a little bit brutal in certain ways, but it's been, it's had a real fated element to it. And we've had to, work through that individually, in terms of whatever it's brought up for all of us. But now with Jupiter, catching up to Venus and Sirius and all three of them lining up, it's kind of, I feel like that's going to be that could be like the reward, not from a personality, egotistical bullshit place, but from a much higher place. That can be such a beautiful reward for the work that we've done, on our own personal soul journey and growth that may have been very, very difficult of late. So this is a time to soak in and absorb all the goodness and abundance, but we've just got to remember the Saturn Neptune always reminds us that, yes, there are no limits to our imagination and to what is out there. But we do have to we do have to know our own limits and we do have to create boundaries. And one simple way to understand that would be to say that as much as, all of us may have, a wish list of 1,000 things or 1,000,000 things, but are we going to be able to do all those things in one lifetime? We are not. because we live in a Saturn world. That's why Saturn reminds us that there are limitations, there are borders, there are boundaries. We cannot have everything, do everything, and experience everything in the one lifetime. That's what Saturn consistently reminds us of. But Neptune always reminds us that regardless of the physicality and the boundaries and the limitations that we may have, our imagination is not, can't be, what's the word? Our imagination is limitless, as simple as that. And, we give birth to new desires and new ideas all the time. We may not see the fruits of those ideas in the same one lifetime, but we are constantly giving birth to things that we may be actually planting seeds for new cycles to come, or even for, a new cycle in a new incarnation. Never forget that. We can get so limited, in our sight and vision and thoughts by trying to do everything and bring it all home right now, today, or in this lifetime. But it's not all happening just in this lifetime. Okay. I think that's where I will sign off. So I hope that everyone experiences some beauty, some love, with the Venus-Jupiter-Sirius portal, because it is pretty spectacular and it doesn't happen that often. I will see you soon. Reach out if you'd like to connect with me and look at your chart in any way that you wish to. Much love, and bye for now.